Johnny, can I come to you on the issue of growth again? Is there anything you particularly can sort of focus on there?
I would come back a little bit on that, John, because I think what business wants to fundamentally see from us is, are we good for our word? You know, when we say growth is the mission, how are we going to prove that? How are we going to convince people that that is absolutely where our political priorities will lie? Exactly as Rachel has said, they've heard from other people, other governments in the past. They want to know when you get that countervailing pressure, well, but what about this? What about that? What about that person not liking it? Are we going to say, no, this is the mission and this is the imperative? And we are. So I don't think it's about people just banking the long term, because the one thing the UK has needed in the last few years is more of a long term, right? So they want that long term focus. And I think that's where you get the confidence. If people do not look at the UK, they risk missing out, right? That's genuinely the case, because this is a government so resolved to make the difference, because we know that is what we have to do. So I don't think it's a question of, you know, okay, people think the long term's great, they want the short term. They want to see that long term following through and the commitment that comes with that. And then they will see when, you know, some of the pressures, some of the conversations about the global trading position, the leadership role the UK will take in terms of open markets being a key part of that. I mean,
surely the single thing that you could do that would give the most amount of growth is to do a fresh deal with Europe. To do something like a customs union. That's what virtually every number that people have run on that shows the biggest increase in GDP compared with all the other things you're talking about.
It's first of all, will this debate ever end? I mean, I think
didn't
about
say rejoining the European Union. I said something akin to
I would say something like this. That first of all, we want, and again, there's a high degree of ambition on our side, a reset of that relationship with Europe. We're up for an ambitious conversation about that. I do think, again, people sometimes fail to recognise that, you know, the problems, the evident problems, the challenges of leaving the European Union for the UK were obviously about a significant change in our terms of trade. I think you've got to recognise, if you're, as we have done, leaving something like the single market, there's a cost there. You have to mitigate that. But I think a conversation just about Europe, honestly, it's not enough in its own right to give the UK the platform it needs.
Hello. Now that was Jonathan Reynolds, the Secretary of State for Trade and Industry, Johnny, and that was him talking at Davos back in February. He was being interviewed with Rachel Reeves. And if you have a clue as to what he was talking about, then you're smarter than I am, because I have no idea. Nonetheless, he is the person who is spearheading our advance to becoming global Britain, and he's doing these mammoth trade deals all over the world. Johnny, actually, before he became a member of Parliament, he was a trainee solicitor, and then he didn't actually qualify, and then he worked for as an assistant to an MP, a former MP called Johnny Purnell, and then he became an MP himself, and now he's head of trade and industry. Now, like me, almost certainly this week you'll have been celebrating the 9th anniversary of our decision to leave the EU. And I'm sure that you'd agree with me that the country's been transformed ever since we left. I mean, the country you see today is quite unrecognisable from the country we were when we decided to leave. And I wanted to talk about some of the challenges that we're facing right now. And I see them as being really three. I think the first is growth, and where's the growth going to come from? The second is a shortage of workers, and where we're going to get the workers from. And the third is a lack of inward investment, where we're going to get the investment from. Now, the government woke up some time ago to the fact that we need growth. I think they suddenly realised that we need a lot of money. I think every department you can shake a stick at needs money. We now need even more money for additional defence spending, but nonetheless we need an awful lot of money. And I think they must have just twigged that the only way you can get any money is by expanding economic activity. There is no other source. You can borrow money, of course, and you can print money, but those are not long-term options. And so they suddenly realised that they need to expand the economy. But frankly, you only had to listen to Johnny for a few moments to realise they haven't got a clue, not a clue. None of them has any experience of business whatsoever. But nonetheless, they are going for growth. Now, the way it's worked in the past is that people have formed businesses and their businesses have done quite well, and you get to a certain point where you're supplying the UK market, you think, oh, let's start exporting, and so the obvious thing is to go across the channel. It's very easy, very convenient, nearby, and it's exactly what happened to me. I had a business in London, I was doing quite well, and I thought, well, I would go in Paris, and so I just got a few samples made, got in the car, went to Paris, took a load of orders, and that was the start of a business. We ended up with 200 odd customers all over Europe. Very, very easy. But now that's no longer possible. And it's no longer possible because for small and medium-sized firms to sell to the EU is virtually impossible. And the reasons I've explained many times before is the fact that if a customer in the EU wants to buy from someone in the UK, they have to be prepared to do import entry, and they have to pay maybe some duty, and they have to pay some VAT, which they might claim back afterwards. They have to pay extra for transport. They have to wait longer for it. So if they get something else from within the EU, the same product, then it's a no-brainer. They're not going to buy from the UK. And so, I mean, this is one of the reasons why I think it's something like 16,000 firms that had been exporting to the EU stopped doing so almost immediately after Brexit. It was catastrophic for so many firms. And so, if we're looking for growth, we can forget the EU. We've shut it off, and then we're left with where else can we sell? Well, all over the world. We've been told time and time again, let's go global. We weren't allowed to. In the EU, we weren't allowed to sell in any other country apart from the EU. It wasn't allowed. So now suddenly we can sell everywhere. And Johnny has got some trade deals. He's got one with India, and I've talked about this before. But the Indian deal was going to result in, I think, quite a lot of Indians coming to work in the UK, and they're no doubt going to be IT experts, and they'll probably disrupt the IT trade here to a certain extent. They're going to be much cheaper, and they won't be liable for employers' national health insurance and so on. So they're going to be very attractive to employ, and in return, we're going to be able to export to India. Now, I'm not sure what there is to export to India, but I did hear Douglas Alexander, who's a minister at the Department of Trade and Industry. He was on the radio this morning. They were saying to him about what sort of advantages is going to be this deal with India, and he gave an example of all the examples he could give. He said, take for example a small whiskey distillery in Scotland would now be able to export whiskey to India, and it would not be subject to such high tariffs. Previously, I think the tariffs on Scotch whisky have been 150%, they're now 75%, they're coming down to 40%. So suddenly there's going to be this vast market for little distilleries in Scotland to sell their whisky in India on the other side of the world. I think when they were selling it in the EU, which they probably find very difficult now, but when they were selling in the EU, they I don't think it was subject to any duty. But anyhow, that's the India deal, and then you'll remember that the Labour Party, before they became the government, were going on and on about what a lousy deal the Tories had got with the EU, and how they were going to renegotiate it. We were hearing this all the time, endlessly, we can get a much better deal, and indeed they've renegotiated a better deal very recently. And I think it consists of three main points, I think, as Johnny will point out in this clip.
And I can confirm that a deal has been done. That's great news, but it's not about relitigating those arguments of the past. It's not about being a member of the EU or the single market or the customs union even. It is about removing some things, some unnecessary checks and frictions to trade and our security relationship with the European Union. To give you some specific examples of that, well, look, first of all, what we're seeking is if you are travelling to a European country, you can use the e-gates. It's easy to take your pet, so your life's going to be a little bit more straightforward. And particularly for my part of this, the trade side of it. Look, our trade with the European Union in goods has declined from where it should be following Brexit. On food and agriculture in particular, which is part of this agreement, we have a situation where, despite having the same rules in place, our trade with Europe, our exports are down by about a fifth. We've got the same standards in place. We've got a lot of unnecessary checks that add to cost, add to complexity.
So when exporting or importing food to and from the EU, there will be slightly fewer forms to fill in future. It won't make any difference to how long it takes to get the stuff in and out and so on, and it'll make a very, very little difference. And at the same time, of course, we're going to be able to use the e-gates, and also it's apparently going to be easier to get a pet passport. So slightly fewer forms when importing and exporting food, being able to use the e-gates, and not having to, or having less difficulty getting a pet passport is what they call a better deal. And this is bearing in mind that we've lost £100 billion worth of trade a year with the EU, amounting to something like £40 billion worth of tax for the government. So it's hardly a noticeably better deal than the one we had before. And then there's the deal with America, the deal or no deal. I think the Americans called it as a concept for a deal, but it may or may not have been. It seems that you'll have seen that scene in the G7 the other day, where there was that sort of staged thing where Trump opened a folder with loads of blank pages that fell on the floor, and Starmer felt obliged to pick them up, which I'm sure was set up actually, and just made Trump look dominant and so on. But anyway, the America trade deal is it's even if it were a deal, even if they have signed anything, it's all dependent upon what mood Trump is in. It's nothing that you could possibly rely on. He can change his mind overnight. So there's all three deals which are have been calculated to add to our GDP. I think it's something like 0.04% in 10 years' time. The whole three of them all together. In other words, there's nothing. And yet we're desperate for growth, and so we're going to find the growth. Yeah, if you're a small company, you're making some food stuff, you're making some pies, or you're making some cheese or something. I mean, where are you supposed to go? And if you can't go to the EU, you can go to Africa, you go to South America, Asia, Australia, New Zealand. I mean, it's absurd. You know, the cost of travel to a foreign country to try and sell products where you might not sell anything anyway, so difficult, so expensive. And yet that's what we're left with. We either grow within our businesses within the UK. I don't know how you do that when nobody's got any money. Who is going to open a business right now? Who's going to open a restaurant or a pub or a shop or a factory in the UK right now? Unless they're crazy. Because everybody's suffering, everybody's short of money. And so, as I say, I just don't see where this growth's coming from. We keep hearing all the time, and we hear, we're going to go for growth, global Britain. And until we get any growth, we're going to remain poor or even poor. And all the time they're talking about paying more for this and paying more for that. Look, we're committed to paying so much more for defence. Very important we do as well. But you know, they talk about you can't get care workers. So, put the salaries up. I mean, frankly, in my view, care workers deserve 2 or 3 times what they're getting paid. But nonetheless, where's the money coming from? Then, talking of care workers, there's the shortage of workers. We know that since Brexit, we've been short of workers in care, in the NHS, and in hospitality, in construction, abattoirs, and in agriculture. We're short of workers all over the place. Terrible shortage of workers. And until whilst we were in the EU, we had all these youngsters would come across from Europe, and then you'd go into a Costa's Coffee and you'd find that you were served by a Spanish young lady or a Greek young man or something. They'd come here to learn English for a couple of years and they'd go home again. And people used to come from Romania and Bulgaria to go pick crops up in Lincolnshire and so on. And we had Polish construction workers. And it all worked, it was all great. But we didn't want them there. We didn't want them for Europeans here. No, taking all our jobs, using the NHS, some of them. And so we got rid of them all, and then, as we all know, the government got short and started advertising people in Nigeria and Bangladesh and India. And then Nigel Farage, who dictates government policy in these matters, he started grumbling about it and too many Muslims and all the rest of it, and so the government decided to clamp down. They clamped down completely now, so that you can't bring anyone into this country to work at any job unless they're going to be paid getting on for £40,000 a year. And so that's going to have a huge effect upon foreign workers coming to this country. And so the shortage is going to get worse. And what's the answer? Oh, train up our own people. We're going to train up young people. You're going to train people up to work in nursing homes? Or to dig fields, digging carrots, work in abattoirs, work on construction sites when it rains sometimes? It's just utterly bonkers. And this is just going to get worse and worse because we are, as we all know, we're an ageing population, and all these people who hate foreigners, the Farage supporters who just hate foreigners, when they're in nursing homes and there's no one there to look after them because they don't want to be touched by a Romanian, they might think twice about it. And the other problem, of course, is inward investment, and that's another word for selling everything to foreigners. And as we know, we've sold off so much of our assets, our utilities and our businesses. You look at, as I've said so many times before, the electricity, gas, the water, railways, the ports, the airports. Many of our big businesses, I mean, so much of them are now owned by foreigners. And so, what's there left? What is there left to sell? And we know what's going to happen. And I've said this many times before. The big American, investment companies, the money managers, KKR and BlackRock, they're going to come and start buying our houses, and we'll all be renting our houses from American corporations. And I just don't see how you turn it around. But when you can see, because it is so absolutely obvious that Brexit has really wrecked the country, Brexit destroyed this country, and yet any mention of even a possibly student exchange, and the people are going crying out loud about, oh, this is beginning to go back in, your real intention is to go back in again, to betray the voters, when the clear majority would rather we had never left. And I think, given the fact there is such a strong, especially when with Farage, the man who made it all, who's responsible for everything, man who created this mess, and is now here, all these people who say that it was all done wrong, it all gone wrong. If only he was Prime Minister, he put it all right. It's very difficult to be optimistic. I did want to make a video and try and see if there are any positives out of this mess, but there really aren't. I think, if you've got the opportunity of leaving the country, you should leave the country, frankly. And certainly young people. I think any young person who stays in this country is really crazy. And I think, frankly, for the rest of it, it's just a question of this decline is going to go on. And all the time, they'll be talking about these fantastic trade deals. Imagine these huge trade deals worth absolutely not worth a hill of beans. But anyway, that's what I think about it. If you've watched my videos before, you'll know that's what I think about it. But it's just so depressing. It's just so sad. It's just so stupid. I understand people being fooled by the likes of Farage and Boris Johnson. These were just con men who conned millions of people. But I think that the people now, there are still people who think Brexit was a good idea. And you look back and see what's happened. Crazy. Anyway, if you watched this far, thank you very much indeed. I very much appreciate it. If you haven't already subscribed, I would appreciate if you do so. And so until next time, thank you for watching, and bye for now.